Bismillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. We continue now with our discussion of the spiritual principles that would help me to make better decisions in every element of my life. And as you remember, we looked earlier at the elements of the human self, and we call that the psychology of the self. And we said that we need to understand what are the elements, the components of me, of the I want, I love, I say. Who is the I? Which I is speaking? And we said that we need to understand what are the elements of me, what are the relationships between those elements, how do they affect decisions, what is the inner process, the process within me that makes decisions, and then what are my blind spots, and what can I do to correct those blind spots or those faulty processes within me. And then we looked at the most important element of the human being, the qalb. And we said that in addition to the qalb, there are three other elements of the human composition, There's the nafs, the base self. There's the aql, the intellect, and the jawarih, the senses. For this episode, we want to focus on the nafs now. We've looked at the qalb, the spiritual heart, its importance, its centrality, its function. And now let us look at the nafs, or the base self. The first question, what is the nafs? Nafs is translated usually as the lower self, as the base self. And the nafs is that creation within me that expresses, if you like, the trials and tests of my humanity, the trials of my human condition. In another way, because I am human, I have certain drives, I have certain energies, if you like, and the nafs is the locus of those energies by dint of being human. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا. Allah ta'ala says, and by the nafs, Allah ta'ala takes an oath by the nafs and the one who fashioned the nafs and the one who inspired the nafs with what is good and what is bad. So by virtue of being human, I have certain drives, certain energies. They may be bad, they may be good. When we speak about the nafs, usually we're speaking about those negative drives, those negative propensities that need to be purified, that need to be brought into balance, that need to be modified. Now, the nafs and its energies are essentially two types. We can categorize them as. Number one, we call some of those energies, some of those drives within the nafs, we would call them shahawat, plural of shahwa. And shahwa means simply a bodily appetite. Those appetites of the nafs, those drives, those energies that are connected to the body, to the needs of the body, the sensual drives, the carnal drives, like, for example, the drive to eat, the drive to drink, the drive to sleep, the drive for physical intimacy, the drive to entertain oneself and play, and. Those are called the shahawat, the physical, sensual, carnal appetites and drives. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions it in the Quran in many different places. زُيِّنَ لِلنَّاسِ حُبُّ الشَّهَوَاتِ And then Allah Ta'ala enumerates the different sorts of shahawat beautified for human beings is the love of shahawat, the love of these drives, because we are ultimately nufus. We are created, and each one of us has a nafs, and we have these natural drives that can become excessive and can become harmful. And so when we speak about the shahawat of the nafs, the carnal desires of the nafs, we're speaking primarily of those excessive drives. Because some drives, as you know, are necessary. I have to eat, I have to sleep, I need physical intimacy. But when those drives become domineering, when become predominant, excessive, exaggerated, then we overeat, we oversleep, we overindulge those carnal sensual appetites. And the second sort of nafs appetite, if we can call it that, would be the hawa, the ahwa, plural ahwa, singular hawa. Those are the intellectual appetites, the philosophical, ideological appetites, meaning the way, the ideas that I have, the philosophies that I embrace, the ways of thinking that I sanction. When I say something is good, when I say something is bad, those would be classified as my hawa, my ideological, philosophical, intellectual, dialectical inclinations. And hawa usually is, when we speak about it, is usually placed in opposition to what Allah loves and Allah commands. So my hawa, if I say the hawa of someone, it means the hawa, the inclinations, intellectual, philosophical inclinations that are in discord, that are in opposition to what Allah loves. So hawa, by definition, now here is negative. So Allah Ta'ala, for example, tells us in the Quran, وَمَنْ أَضَلُّ مِمَّنِ اتَّبَعَ هَوَاهُ بِغَيْرِ هُدًى مِنَ اللَّهِ. Who is more astray, misguided, than the one who follows their hawa and not the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, those are the conceptual definitions, and I think many of us would be able to understand. I love ice cream. That's a type of shahwa, not necessarily bad. I think that one ought not to wear the hijab, for example. That would be not a shahwa but a hawa. It would be a normative, a moral, ethical judgment based on a certain philosophy that I have. That would be a hawa. So in just, the nafs has these two drives, these two energies, hawa and shahwa. Now, on the basis of these two drives, and we can perhaps see now how my decisions, my perception, my choices would be colored by my nafs, depending on its energies. If the energies of the nafs want something and are very focused, committed to attaining it, that will color the way in which I see it, analyze it, and it will color my choices. And so based on these energies and drives, inclinations in the nafs, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks of different kinds of nufus, plural of nafs, different sorts of lower selves. And we know, I think most of us would know, in the Quran that there are generally three types. The nafsul ammara bisu, the nafs that is always inclined to evil, meaning it is predominantly inclined to evil, commanding to evil, constantly commanding to evil, based on its drives and energies of shahawat and ahwa, as we explained. There's a nafs that is lawama, meaning it vacillates between doing good and doing bad. Some of those negative shahawat and ahwa overwhelm it at certain times, and sometimes it is able to keep them in check and keep them in control. And so lawama is it blames itself when it does bad, but it also does good. So it vacillates between the two states. And then we have al-nafs al-mutma'inna, the balanced, tranquil soul, where most, if not all, of its feelings, its actions, its words, its commands are all in accordance with what Allah loves, and it is in a state of tranquility, serenity, and felicity. Those three types or typologies are given by the Quran. And the ulama, now looking at the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and giving more detail to those three types of nufus in the Quran, they say the following, that when we look at them in detail, we can classify the nafs as one of four kinds. And this is interesting. Each of us has a nafs that is based on one of those four, one of the following, which I'll mention, four types of nufus, or a combination of that, meaning my inner reality, what I'm like inside, what my nafs is like truly. If I could shine a mirror to myself that in some miraculous way could reflect what I am, the nafs that I am, I would see in the image of the mirror one of these four, or a combination of these four types of nufus. The first one is a cattle-like nafs, what's called a bahimi nafs, meaning this sort of nafs, it spends its energy, its time, its resources, its focus in living, in choosing, in wanting like an animal, in specific a herbivore, meaning like a cow or a pig or a goat, in the sense that it lives to satisfy its base desires, it lives to satisfy its shahawat, it lives to eat, it lives to sleep, it lives to play, and it lives for physical intimacy. And that is the focus of its life. The energies, the focus, my mental energy, my intellectual energy, my time, my resources, my planning, my choices all surround fundamentally, primarily, eating, how to eat more in different ways, in more sophisticated ways. The same with drinking, playing, partying, entertaining, and physical intimacy. And Allah speaks about this in the Quran as well. وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا يَتَمَتَّعُونَ وَيَأْكُلُونَ كَمَا تَأْكُلُ الْأَنْعَامُ, that those who disbelieve, they enjoy and they eat as cattle enjoy and eat and live. So this nafs, this sort of archetype of nafs, this bahimi or cattle-like nafs, is one of the four sorts of nufus that I can develop in my life by my choices, by my habits, by the way, by my style of life. I make my nafs a cattle-like nafs. Number two, the hyena or the wolf-like or the predatory-like nafs, also called in Arabic the sabu'i nafs. That is my nafs, in addition usually to having cattle-like inclinations and tendencies, this nafs enjoys and loves the actions of a predator. And a predator likes to maim, to kill, to be in conflict with others, to steal, to usurp, to harm, to hurt. This is the life of a predator. This is the life of a wolf or a hyena, and that's how they live, and that's how they choose to live. That's how they love to live. That's how they were created to live by Allah Ta'ala in some way. For them, there's no blame. But when I choose to live like a predator, to compete in a vicious way, to kill the competition, to hurt, to maim, to wound, to steal, to usurp, that sort of energy and inclination in me is what is called a sabu'i inclination, a predatory inclination. And indeed, I could have a nafs that is partly or wholly or mostly predatory. And Rasulullah ﷺ speaks about that. In the later times, he said, there would come people أَلْسِنَتُهُمْ أَحْلَى مِنَ الْعَسَلِ. Their tongues are sweeter than honey. وَقُلُوبُهُمْ قُلُوبُ الذِّئَابِ. But their hearts are the hearts of wolves. Meaning, in the full text, they portray to people a very gentle, kind, considerate side, like they are sheep. And they're very, very articulate and very, very kind and gentle and very persuasive in their speech, but their hearts are the hearts of wolves. So that could also be the reality of who I am. If I shine a mirror to my nafs and I could see my nafs, is it a cow in reality, though I am in human form? Is it a wolf in reality? Or is it the third type, a shaitan? That is that some nufus have these shaitanic tendencies. And the shaitan, as you know, lives to lie, lives to deceive, lives to cause animosity between people, lives to make himself, aggrandize himself as a leader, as a lord, as a god in some sense, power, prestige. This is, the shaitan lives to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, arrogant and stubborn in his arrogance. And so indeed I could have the characteristics of a nafs that is shaitani, is devilish, is satanic. And also Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam speaks about this in hadith, that there could be people, قُلُوبُهُمْ قُلُوبُ الشَّيَاطِينَ فِي جُثْمَانِ إِنْسٍ. That there would be a people who their hearts are the hearts of the shayateen in the body of human beings, in human form. And then the fourth type and last type of nafs is the angelic nafs. And the angelic nafs, or al-nafs al-malaikiyya, is the one that finds its happiness, its feelings, its choice, its experiences in obeying Allah, in remembering Him, and finds the greatest and sweetest solace and satisfaction in loving, remembering, obeying, worshipping, thanking the Divine subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now we have the inner realities of our nafs, either cat-like or predatory or shaitani or satanic or angelic, or at the level of the angel. Now these sorts of characteristics of the nafs, this would constitute in some way my nafs footprint, or my nafs fingerprint, probably fingerprint and not really footprint. Just like each of us has a unique fingerprint, we could have a unique nafs print, I guess, or fingerprint of my nafs, which is that, what is my nafs? Is it one of those cat-like, predatory, satanic, angelic nufus? Is it a combination of them? And what sort of combination? How much of me is cat-like? How much of me is satanic? How much of me is predatory? How much of me is angelic? And that inner reality, that inner truth of who I am, that could be actually studied, even studied in a certain sense that I could, for example, put my nafs under the microscope of studying, where do I spend my energies? How do I live my day? What are my choices? What do I seek? What do I want? Where do I spend my time? And even, to diarize, for example, a day in my life and many days, and to see qualitatively and quantitatively where the energy, the life energy of my life is devoted for. What do I, in a general sense, worship? What do I seek? What do I love? What am I attached to? By examining my attachments, I would actually be able to understand in a very powerful way and true way what sort of nafs I have. And now we will speak about that in more detail, but I think you would be able to glean even from this now what sorts of choices, what sorts of reasons would drive someone who is a cat-like nafs, or a predatory nafs, or a satanic nafs, or an angelic nafs. Lastly, we've spoken about qalb, we've spoken about nafs. How does the nafs and the qalb interact? We can say three things here. The drives of the nafs affect the qalb, meaning the drives of my lower self affect my spiritual heart. If I am very predatory, that will make my heart have a predatory inclination and a predatory essence. If I am satanic or mostly satanic, wal-iyadu billah, that will affect what my heart is. My heart will take on the constitution of my nafs. That is the state of the nafs. The way I am at my nafsani level will determine what I am at my qalbi or spiritual level. And therefore, the ulama, as an aside, when they speak about purifying oneself, they speak about purifying the nafs. And they don't speak about purifying the heart. They don't say tazkiyatul qalb, they say tazkiyatul nafs, because the nafs is the locus of blameworthy traits and characteristics, and the nafs influences the heart. And therefore, for the heart to be sound and cleansed, and for the heart to think properly, feel properly, and will properly, the nafs needs to be cleansed. And so by this brief discussion, and I hope it would be sufficient, we understand the nafs and the types of the nafs, and we understand its relationship to the spiritual heart, to the qalb, and we can begin to see now the inner processes at the spiritual level within me that animate the way in which I think, reason, synthesize, analyze, and choose. And I can also begin to see the blind spots. Why is it that I don't choose things that are good for me? At this level of analysis, it's very much dependent on the way I am constitutionally at the level of my nafs. Inshallah, we will end there, and we will continue in our next episode with a discussion of the intellect and the senses and how they connect and their relationship with the spiritual heart, the qalb, and the base lower self, the nafs. Jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.